Welcome to Recovery Radio by Landmark Recovery with your host, Zach Crouch. In this program, we'll discuss the root causes and treatments of alcohol and substance addiction, speak with experts in related fields, and help navigate the road to recovery. Now, here's the host of Recovery Radio, Zach Crouch.
Hi, I'm Zach Crouch, and you're listening to Recovery Radio, your source for addiction and recovery news and knowledge. You can find us online wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe to get the most up-to-date information from leading experts. In this episode, we'll be talking about parents, or to be more specific, parenting. We'll explore what to do when you find yourself unsure how to tackle the issues today's children are facing. We have guests Michelle Newton-Massey and Beth Uberti joining us today to talk about the important work that they do at Operation Parent. Just want to say welcome to the show to the both of you. We're so grateful to have you on speaking with us today.
Thanks. Thank you for having us here.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you. So, Michelle and Mary Beth, for those who don't know about what Operation Parent is, what is it and what do each of you do?
Well, Operation Parent has been around for 11 years, and our focus is to provide resources, education, and support to those raising preteens and teens. So anyone who's a parent, a caregiver, foster care parents, and then we also do a lot of work with drug and alcohol coalitions, drug and alcohol-free coalitions around the country, providing educational information to them. So we really just want to focus on providing information that a parent and caregiver needs to understand what, then bring up these topics with their kids so that both become educated, not just the parent, but the child also.
Absolutely. Michelle, anything that you'd like to add to that?
Just our webinar program is one thing that I focus on for the organization, and that has continued to grow over the last 3 years. In that effort, we reach
Absolutely.
out to drug-free coalitions, parents, educators, social workers. We've got folks that work with foster care and CASA. You name it, it's a diverse population, but we get an opportunity to get some information out there on the serious topics that our teens are facing and our parents are looking for good information on.
Fantastic. What brought you both into this line of work?
Well, for me, I was a parent. We used to have classes called Parenting 101. And when my daughter entered middle school, I went to a class. And what it was a way for me, it was to meet other parents and then just to become informed.
Sure.
And it really was focusing on the role of a parent. The role of a parent to educate, to set the boundaries, not be afraid of setting the boundaries and consequences. How do you understand warning signs? So I quickly then met Gene, the founder, Gene Shum, not too long after that, and then just went and started working for the organization, just doing whatever we needed, because at that point it was very small. We have a parent handbook that has been, now we're working on our 8th edition, that covers for the middle and high school over 40 topics related to parenting. And I came in then eventually as the program developer. So I'm director of program development.
Okay.
And so part of my job also is to go out in the community. So I do presentations throughout Kentucky, the United States. I've traveled, and just talking about anything from social media, drugs, alcohol, mental health issues, things with the keeping in mind the heart of a parent and talking parent to parent. So, and I've just stayed here since then.
Michelle, what about you? How did you get into this line of work?
Absolutely. So I came in with a background of 20 years in student affairs, or higher ed administration, as some of us call it. And in my position in campus housing, I would work with students that were having mental health issues and needed to get to the counseling center, or very low coping skills based on a struggle that they encountered in college, or maybe some poor decision making around drugs and alcohol, where they broke some of the rules and regulations within the residence hall community. And then on the flip side, I would see students who are just thriving on the college campus, who are making really good decisions to either stay alcohol and drug free, being resilient when they've battled through tough things, or persisting to graduation even though they did have challenges. And through all that, I sort of recognize we need to get to teens earlier to ramp up their decision making around drugs and alcohol and their coping skills. And an opportunity to partner up with Operation Parent came on board, and I jumped on that. I feel really passionate about working with teens because I have 2 teens of my own. I've got 2 nieces. I see their tribe of friends, and I just want to get good information for myself, but also for others.
Absolutely. So it sounds to me like both of you have a underlying passion for this work that probably fuels your day to day. If I had to take a guess, that's a big piece of this, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yes.
And with that being said, I want to focus our shift. I want to shift our focus rather to the topic of today, which is the whole issue around vaping, and that's in the news a lot now, and especially its focus on teens and its their use of vaping devices. So you guys are in front of this stuff all the time. How has vaping changed the face of addiction for today's teens?
Well, for a lot of our youth, if we're focusing on the e-cig issue, we taught them really well to stay away from traditional cigarettes. They have all kinds of classes inside of school, but when e-cigarettes came out onto the market, it kind of took everybody surprised that the teens latched onto it. And when they did latch onto it, what they've done for most of them without even realizing is they became addicted to nicotine. They didn't quite understand that what they were doing was inhaling nicotine. And with an adolescent brain, their chances of addiction are higher just because it's a growing brain. It's a changing brain. And so that changed the whole focus of what was happening. They are still using marijuana and alcohol. That is still the most commonly abused substance. But within the tobacco world, it's far surpassed traditional cigarettes with our youth. So about 1 in 5 high school students are vaping, and 1 in 20 middle school students are vaping. And that's an interchangeable word with vaping and e-cigs. We'll talk about that later. But that is what's happened. So it became, schools were sounding the alarm first because they were seeing it in schools, kids getting in trouble with it, sharing them, and everything just started ramping up very quickly. It just became an issue that I don't think most people realized that it was even an issue until the schools were raising the alarm that, hey, there is something happening here.
Right. Well, it begs the question on my end, if a teen vapes, are they more likely to progress to other drugs or different types of tobacco even?
For what we do know is when a teen is using e-cigarettes, so they become addicted to nicotine. It's a nicotine addiction. They need the nicotine, otherwise they feel sick.
Right.
That's the way it works. So, these packs, depending on what product they're using, it's going to get harder and harder for them to get a hold of them. Right now, in the state of Kentucky, at least, they've raised the age to 21. Online, for some of the e-cigarette companies, they've made it harder for youth to get a hold of it. Now, obviously, when you want it, you can get it. Get somebody older to buy it for you, everything else. So if it's going to be harder for them to get a hold of it, what they'll do and what they have seen is then they will transition to traditional cigarettes. So, which is the complete opposite of what the intention was when e-cigarettes came out. It was meant for adult smokers to leave traditional cigarettes and have a safer alternative to get their nicotine. Now we have the opposite that's happening. We are seeing kids become addicted to e-cigarettes and then make the transition over to traditional cigarettes with all the harms that come with it. So the tar, the lung issues.
Right.
Now we are seeing lung issues now with these e-cigarettes.
I've heard this tossed around before, and maybe you've heard of it, but this idea of popcorn lung, have you all heard of this?
Mm-hmm.
Does that what
Yes.
is this exactly, and how does it relate to vaping?
Well, some of the products that they use to create the liquid to hold the flavoring, one of them is like, if I mess this up, it's propylene glycol.
Okay.
It's a flavoring that is what they're putting in the pods to help with the flavoring because they are sweet flavors, most of them. So the FDA has approved it for ingestion. There is for eating. You might see it in food products, but it was never intended for breathing it into the lungs. So when it gets into the lungs, it's actually coating the lungs. And where it came out with the word popcorn lung was, I don't know how many years ago, the factories were making the popcorn that you put in your microwave. And they would use that byproduct to make their product, to keep the flavoring. But people who were working there were inhaling it because they were working with it. And they were coming up with problems with their lungs. And lo and behold, that's the name from popcorn lung, is they had this issue with their lungs, with the coating of their lungs. So it's almost like a film is coating the inside of the lung, and the lung does not work properly. And that's where it comes from.
Well, now that we're on that topic of obviously having problems with the lungs, what else about vaping is not safe?
Okay. Well, Michelle, do you want to?
Well, I was thinking not on the safety note yet, but I was thinking about the marketing. When you look at the marketing, and it went directly to teens in terms of the flavors. If you Google and look up YouTube videos, you'll see videos of folks making smoke rings with the e-cigs and all these fancy, cool things.
Right.
And the flavors are, there's not any adult person who's probably going to go after like the unicorn breath flavor. And so when you look at all that, you look at where it's placed in stores, that it was directly marketed purposely to teens, and that's frightening to me.
Well, and there's some major lawsuits going on right now, if I'm not mistaken, right, Michelle?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You were also asking what was not safe about the product.
Correct.
Beyond the other thing to keep in mind is we call it vaping, but they're not vaping. They're actually inhaling and creating an aerosol. So a vape is just water vapor. That's kind of another illusion with it. So kids will say I'm vaping, but you're really not. You're really creating an aerosol. An aerosol contains other products in the air with that smoke that comes out. So it can have ultrafine particles, other cancer-causing chemicals, heavy metals can be contained in it, nicotine and lead. So the term
you say lead? There's lead in this stuff?
It can be, yeah, it depends. And here's the other thing. What's advertised for what's in those pods, they'll say it contains nicotine. Juul, right on its packaging, says it contains nicotine. Most kids, now, if you ask them, a majority of them will say it doesn't. But actually, it's right on the packaging, contains nicotine.
Right.
They'll say it contains something to create the flavoring and to create the plume. But there are all different products out there, and not all of them are telling you exactly what's in their liquids.
Right.
And then you have other off-brands or black market brands. They can put whatever they are in them, and nobody really knows how or what is in some of these products and how it can affect the person. And we, as you mentioned, and we see that with the kids that are landing in the hospital, teenagers, young adults. There's a whole nother level to this where a big number of those people that are ill were, I'll say the word vaping again, but they were using THC to get a high.
Right.
And they now do know that the product, the liquid, has another product in there, like a vitamin E byproduct.
Some sort of stabilizer or something, I guess.
Right, to stabilize it. And that's really what's been causing. Now, there are people that have been hospitalized that have been strictly using e-cigarettes who are sick. So there's kind of a two-tier things going on here. And this is part of it, is we don't know the long-term ramifications. We're now seeing some of it. So the dangers for our youth beyond addiction is getting sick and landing in the hospital.
Right.
And, and then the whole thing where they just don't know how to help the people that are in the hospital. They're getting better at it as they see it, but they just don't know everything.
Got it. I'm curious to know, do we know in terms of one of those Juul pods, how much nicotine is in that? In other words, a pack of cigarette, does one Juul pod equate to like one pack of cigarettes, or how does it work? Do you know?
Yes. One Juul pod exactly equates to a cigarette. One pack of cigarettes.
One pack.
So one pod, one pack.
And I've heard, Mary Beth, that some of these kids and adults for that matter are going through multiple pods per day.
Yes. Yeah. And you think about it, you can have a kid going through a pod as a one pack cigarette addiction. Well, then they're sharing the pods because let's face it, they are, being economical and they're pulling their money and sharing the pods. So amongst a few of them, they can go through quite a few pods. And in some stories I've read, a young man was spending $150 a month on e-cigarettes supplies. Wow. So that was, and he ended up being sick. But his family had no idea he was doing this. They just didn't know that this was an issue because it conceals so well.
Got it. You talk about concealing. So one of the things I think that a lot of these kids end up switching to, if they've been smoking cigarettes, they switch to vaping, or if they're just trying out vaping in general, they start with vaping, is that they can vape in bathrooms and in class for that matter and really not get caught. So how are kids able to do that?
Well, I think you can hold the device in your hand and conceal it so easily because it was designed to be that way on purpose. And there's very low odor with the pods, and you can, they're putting their hoodie up and they're turning their head to the side and concealing that way, or they'll blow the vapor in their elbow. It dissipates very quickly, and there's very low odor, so they can go under the radar. They can do it in the classroom, which we're hearing that they are very heavily, and go into the bathroom and just, go right under the radar with it.
Wow. Okay. So is it easy for these kids to, if they start vaping, to stop vaping, or is it really difficult?
It's
difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult. They're addicted. They're addicted to nicotine. So, and for all the cessation programs that were created, obviously they were created for adults who are addicted to traditional cigarettes. So it's taken a little bit for everything to start saying, okay, how do we help them who are adolescents with their brain development to get off of e-cigs. So there's different options, but it definitely changed that whole dynamic that had not been before been an issue. It changed that dynamic.
Got it.
There's really great resources up on the Center for Disease Control to quit smoking, and questions and resources for parents to support their teen. And it's tough. I mean, it's really tough.
There's a site called teen.smokefree.gov that they can go to. Pediatricians also can help. There's an app called Quit Start.
Okay.
That is another place they can go. And then the other places that Michelle mentioned are available to help them. But sometimes even just talking to the pediatrician and trying to get that step going to begin this process to wean away from it.
Got it. You said Quit Start as in QUIT as in Tom, Quit Start?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. It seems like
there's
an
organization. Oh, sorry, Zach. For locally, there's an organization for quitnowkentucky.org which I think we said, but just making sure that's on the list there for after the show here.
Good deal. This to me seems like an age-old question because it was around when I was growing up and a teenager. The question at least is why smoke cigarettes or vape in the first place, right? And what makes it so attractive? And the common response is, well, it makes me look cool. I feel older, and I'm more mature. Is there anything in addition to those sort of themes now, or themes that are present now?
Yeah. The flavor is number one. They taste good. I mean, you've got cherry, creme brulee, there's just a plethora of flavors, right, that you don't have to taste the taste of a cigarette, Right. Somebody starts out of curiosity. It gives a real quick hit to the brain.
Yeah.
Which makes it, I want to try that again. It's just that natural progression of addiction. I need that. But then doesn't take long, and now you've got the nicotine addiction going. But if your friends are doing it, your chances are higher. You're going to try it, and then if everybody's, has the pods and has them, and it's just that, again, that peer, not even for some peer pressure, but the friends groups are very strong. They want to be with people that do things that are similar. They will, find that group. And then, as Michelle said, the videos made it all look really cool.
Yep.
It just did. You want to make yourself popular, then do a couple videos, upload them and see, and then you're going to keep trying to outpace that. And you're just actually increasing your addiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're building up a tolerance, right? So,
right. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that this is something where, 1 in 20 are now doing this vaping in middle school. Is this a topic I should be discussing with my middle school student?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that for them to have good information, I had a student tell me that was in high school and on an athletic team that she almost felt fortunate to have asthma because she could tell her teammates, there's no way I'm going near that because I have asthma, but everybody else around her was doing it, and they were, also athletes. And so it's just like building up the resilience and the ability and the practicing saying no before they're asked or offered. And that takes a lot of practice. I think when you first go in to start practicing, you realize their responses are pretty weak. And you want to build those up and have them be very confident in why they're saying no and why it's important.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking too, just Michelle, is real quick, just as a parent, how do I even bring this up, right? Because it's such a weird time, I think, in a kid's life to be in middle school anyway. There's so many changes going on with the body, and they're just so conflicted with a lot of different messages that are going on. It's like, how do I, prepare? Because my kids are 7 and 1, so that when I'm ready and need to have that conversation, I'm able to have it.
Mary Beth coaches us very well here to position yourself where you're not looking straight at them.
Okay.
So they feel way more comfortable if maybe that you're just riding in the car.
Yeah.
And that something might bring you to that topic more gently, more naturally than head on. And, just asking questions about what they're seeing in school might help give you some good gauges for even preparing the conversation for a little bit later. We found some really good resources out of the Julius B. Richmond Center. So if folks want to go to richmondcenter.org, there's really great fact sheets for parents and good, accurate information on tobacco products, and then just questions to ask so that you can go into that conversation prepared with a lot of segues that you can use based on where your teen might go with the conversation.
Got it.
And the other thing to keep in mind is you model the behavior. So,
Right.
it's
Right.
it's simply
Absolutely.
just saying, hey, this is where I'm at on this. Like, what do you know? Be curious about what they know. They probably know way more than you think they know about this.
You're right. They're experts.
Yeah. So just say, hey, what have you heard about this? Make it a conversation as much as you can. Don't look shocked when they answer you, because sometimes it's really hard not to be shocked.
Oh man.
But
Yeah. Right.
but at the same time, is let them know, hey, you know what? I don't believe in anybody smoking cigarettes, and whether it's a e-cig or a traditional cigarette, I want you not to do it. It's an important health issue. You've become very addicted very easily these years, and I want you to not have this expensive habit. And talk about what you see on TV with the kids laying in hospitals. People have died from this.
Sure.
So it's just to be very upfront and say, I don't want that for you.
Right.
And this can affect so much. And so I'm just being real clear that this is not going to be something we're doing in the family. But then, if you have an addiction to nicotine, then you need to address your own addiction to nicotine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that makes it sometimes really hard. And
it would be quite the conversation as you're lighting up your Marlboro. You're talking to your kid about not vaping.
And then I hear that from parents who say, well, I'm addicted and I've tried. And I said, then address that. Be honest. Look, I have tried for years to stop this and I can't.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And this is what it's done to my body. And be upfront about it, because for some people, it's very hard to stop smoking cigarettes. So if that's the case in your home, be upfront about it. Talk about it and say, I don't want this for you. I don't want this on your back.
Right. I think it's one of the most highly addictive substances in our culture, or in our society is nicotine. I don't think there's much of a question about that. I mean, it's up there with some of the very hard drugs, and in people that are going through both detox and who have been in treatment with us will tell us that, I could kick heroin, right? But coming off this stuff, because it's not socially acceptable. I mean, people think it's disgusting, but it's socially legal. You don't have to, go into these dark corners of the internet or a dark alley to obtain them. You just go to your corner store and get it. So, man, it is very difficult to come off of nicotine. There's no question.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a question though, in terms of vaping, and this isn't to condone it or support it or just outright refute it, but is vaping safer than smoking traditional cigarettes? Is that true?
For an adult who is addicted to traditional cigarettes, you do remove the tar. Okay. So if you're an adult and you're trying to wean yourself off of traditional, that's what it was made for, is that market. You least remove the tar, you might feel healthier, and then there's cessation programs that are available then from there on. But when you're starting the other direction for our youth, they are addicted to nicotine. There's various levels of nicotine in these pods, right, depending on the manufacturer. So you don't know how much you're really going to get. For Juul, it's 1 pod equals 1 pack, but that's not always true. You don't know what you're really inhaling and what it's doing to your body. We're going to keep seeing that change. We don't know what it does for a bystander. We know that secondhand smoke is an issue, but it's an aerosol. You're putting an aerosol out with all these fine particles. What does that do to the people that are around you inhaling it? Right. It still glamorizes smoking. It's just a different form of it.
Right.
And there is no real quality control on these pods. It's not controlled that tightly.
Right.
So until there's more control and more standardization, we just don't know enough. So I don't necessarily think it's safer. It is, if your main objective as an adult is to try to get away from traditional cigarettes. Mm-hmm. I would think, I'm not in that position, but I would think for some people they find that safer. But not for our youth. Not for our youth.
Michelle, anything that you'd like to add to it?
No, I think Mary Beth covered it greatly. Thanks.
Got it. Cool. Well, I think that we've covered a lot, and especially around this whole resources and recommendations that you all have listed here during our podcast on how to have conversations as parents with children about these issues, with addiction and different behaviors and what it can do long term. Because I think long term is what we are ultimately looking at with all of our kids. Where do we want them to be and how do we want them to be successful? And those are all questions that they'll have to answer. But starting them on that right course is so important. And go ahead.
Can I just add one thing with the parents? Something to keep in mind as a parent is to also explain to the kids that you don't know what's in that pod.
Right.
You just don't know. Mm-hmm. Kids have been changing what's in the liquid, adding other things. There are refillable pods that you can buy additional liquids and put that in there. You don't know whether the pod is nicotine or maybe has THC in it. You just don't know. And I think that's an important point to make to parents, is that there is that unknown quality to it.
Yeah, and I'll add too, another really great resource just to start to get your head around up-to-date information on our website, operationparent.org. In our free resource section, we have a webinar that we did with Dr. Pat Purcell, who is a Kentucky expert on vaping, pediatrician, and that's really an excellent overview of vaping in general, the chemical components. But what struck me too is what she's seeing in her practice already as a pediatrician with the effects of teens vaping. But that's a great place to start, even as you fire up for the conversations with the teens. There's really great information there.
No pun intended on the firing up, right?
That's right.
Well, I can't thank you all enough, Michelle and Mary, for taking the time to come on the show today. And to learn more about Operation Parent, you can find them online at operationparent.org. If you know someone struggling with an addiction and are searching for answers, visit us at landmarkrecovery.com to learn more about substance abuse programs that are saving lives and empowering families. And until next week, I'm Zach Crouch with Landmark Recovery Radio, wishing you well.
Thank you for tuning in to Recovery Radio. New content for this program is available every Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time, with all episodes available on demand on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel and through our content partners, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Google Play podcasts. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review so we can continue to create quality content to help save 1 million lives in the next 100 years. You don't need to struggle through addiction alone. Live the life you dreamed on the road to recovery.